Well, our conscience on how we're handling climate change is also part of the crisis care that we're talking about today. Our next guest has been tracking with the science of weather for the last 10 years. She works at the University of British Columbia's Biodiversity Research Center, Dr. Elizabeth Wolkovich. Thank you for being with us. First of all, are weather patterns like this getting worse?
Yes, in general, climate change is going to bring about what we call more extreme events. So things like more droughts, more floods, more hurricanes. And all of those factors have been increasing over the last 10 to 20 years. And the projections are that they will just get worse in the next 20 to 50 years and onward, depending on when we actually have action on climate change.
It's a really overwhelming thing to consider that climate change is affecting the poorest of the poor more than it's affecting countries like ours.
Yes.
Help us understand that.
So, climate change is a global issue. We all share one climate, and that means that countries can basically contribute to climate change at different rates. So, for example, countries like the United States, China right now, in the past Europe, Canada as well, have contributed a lot of the greenhouse gases that cause climate change. But then the consequences of those gases going into the atmosphere are shared by everybody in the system. And the people who are impacted the most are those who either, one, are in the spots that are going to see the biggest and most dramatic changes for things like hurricanes. That means low-lying countries and low-lying areas. And also the people who have the littlest amount of money to support infrastructure to try to combat climate change. So places like Miami, for example, right now pay for pumping out water because of sea level rise, and they can afford to do that. But the poorest nations and the poorest people really have no way to buffer themselves against these major challenges of climate change that were in most part caused by the wealthiest nations and the wealthiest people.
So as you see the effects of Cyclone Idai and what's going on in those three countries, Mozambique the hardest hit, what do you conclude about what the future should look like?
What I hope it will look like is that people are beginning to see increases in hurricanes, and I think at this point it's high enough that I think people are starting to wonder if it could be linked to climate change, that the hurricane seems so much stronger than maybe they seemed to people 10 years ago, and they are, and that will lead to action, global action, where countries will stand up because their citizens want them to, and actually act to change how we mandate, how we use greenhouse gases and how we put them in the atmosphere. We've committed to a lot of dangerous events in the future. The things we're seeing in Mozambique, we're going to see again. We can't undo right now what we've done to the global climate system, but we make a choice every day about how much worse it will be in the future by inaction. So what I hope in the future is that we've committed to an emissions scenario where we don't have greenhouse gases increasing, and then we'll have the ability to actually decide how to help countries financially and through other means deal with what the future climate would be like. Right now, we don't have a plan for climate change, so we can't even prepare well for it, in my mind, because we can't tell people how bad it will be until, as a global community, we decide on how much emissions we will allow into the atmosphere in the future.